Christmas Eve at my childhood home. 28 years old, sitting at the dinner table I had occupied every holiday since I was 12. My stepdad Gerald suddenly towers over me, pointing at my chair with trembling fury. "This seat belongs to my real daughter now. Get out!" Before I can respond, his hands shove my shoulders hard. I crash backward, chair toppling, hitting the hardwood floor as my entire extended family watches in stunned silence. My half-sister Madison smirks from across the room. What Gerald doesn't know is tonight changes everything forever. The day had started so differently. I drove down from Portland that morning, my Honda Civic packed with carefully wrapped presents and a bottle of wine I had picked out specifically for dinner. Working as a forensic accountant for Morrison & Associates kept me busy, but I always made time for Christmas with family. The 3-hour drive gave me plenty of time to think about how much had changed since my biological father died in that construction accident 16 years ago. Mom had been devastated back then, struggling to raise me alone while grieving. When she met Gerald at the local coffee shop where she worked, he seemed like a godsend. He owned Patterson Landscaping, drove a nice truck, and treated both of us well during their courtship. I was 12 when they married, desperate for a father figure, and Gerald stepped into that role with apparent enthusiasm. But things shifted when Madison was born a year later. Suddenly, Gerald had a biological child, and the dynamic in our house changed in ways I was too young to fully understand. The man who had taught me to throw a football and helped with my homework became distant, always finding excuses to spend time with Madison instead of me. Now, at 23, Madison worked as a social media influencer with over 50,000 followers on Instagram. She lived in the basement of Mom and Gerald's house, claiming she needed to build her brand before moving out. Gerald constantly praised her entrepreneurial spirit while dismissing my accounting career as just pushing numbers around. I arrived to find Mom frantically preparing the turkey in the kitchen, her graying hair pulled back in a messy bun flour dusting her favorite red apron. She looked older than her 55-year stress lines creasing her forehead. "Archie, thank goodness you're here," she said, embracing me tightly. "I'm running behind on everything. Gerald's parents are coming, plus Patricia and Jim and Madison invited Tyler." Tyler was Madison's boyfriend, a personal trainer who spent most conversations talking about protein supplements and his latest workout routine. I had met him twice before and found him exhausting. "Where's Gerald?" I asked, rolling up my sleeves to help with the potatoes. "Out getting last-minute supplies," Mom replied, but something in her voice sounded strained. "Madison's in her room getting ready. She has some big announcement for dinner." I spent the next few hours helping Mom prepare the feast. We worked side by side, just like when I was a teenager, falling back into our comfortable rhythm. She told me about her part-time job at the library, how much she enjoyed helping patrons find books and organizing community events. But underneath her cheerful chatter, I sensed an undercurrent of anxiety. Madison finally emerged from the basement around 4 o'clock, wearing a designer dress I suspected cost more than my monthly car payment. Her blonde hair was perfectly styled in beachy waves, and she carried herself with the confidence of someone accustomed to being photographed. "Oh, Archie," she said, barely glancing up from her phone. "I didn't know you were coming." "I come every Christmas, Madison. I helped Mom with the cooking." She shrugged, already distracted by responding to comments on her latest post. "Whatever. Tyler will be here soon, and we have something exciting to share." Gerald's arrival filled the house with booming laughter and the scent of his cologne. He embraced Madison warmly, spinning her around like she was still a little girl, then gave Mom a perfunctory kiss on the cheek. When he noticed me, his smile faltered slightly. "Archie, didn't expect to see you here." "Mom invited me, same as every year." He grunted non-committally and began discussing plans for expanding his landscaping business, directing his comments primarily toward Madison. I continued setting the table, arranging the good china Mom only used for special occasions, trying to ignore the familiar sting of being overlooked. Gerald's parents arrived first. Frank was a retired mechanic in his 70s, still strong despite his age, while Dorothy moved slowly with her walker, but maintained sharp eyes that missed nothing. They hugged Madison enthusiastically and gave me polite nods. Patricia and her husband Jim came next, both teachers who spent most conversations complaining about school district politics. Tyler showed up wearing a suit that was clearly too tight, his muscles straining against the fabric. He immediately began taking selfies with Madison, both of them posing in front of the Christmas tree. As we gathered around the dining room table, Gerald insisted on sitting at the head with Mom to his right and Madison to his left. I took my usual seat across from Madison, the same chair I had occupied for 16 years of holiday meals. Gerald led Grace with unusual solemnity, making pointed comments about being grateful for real family and blood relatives who understand what loyalty means. Mom squeezed my hand under the table, but her grip felt weak, uncertain. The turkey was perfectly golden, the stuffing seasoned just right, and the cranberry sauce had the perfect balance of tart and sweet. Mom had outdone herself, but Gerald barely acknowledged her effort, instead focusing all his attention on Madison and Tyler. Then, just as Mom began serving the sweet potatoes, Madison stood up with a radiant smile. "Everyone, Tyler and I have incredible news to share." She paused dramatically, clearly savoring the moment. "We're pregnant." The room erupted in excitement. Gerald leaped from his chair, embracing Madison with tears in his eyes. "A grandchild. My first grandchild." Patricia clapped enthusiastically, while Dorothy dabbed at her eyes with her napkin. Tyler puffed up with pride, accepting congratulations from Frank and Jim. But then Gerald's expression shifted. He looked directly at me with newfound hostility, his jaw clenched tight. "Madison, you should have the place of honor tonight. This is your celebration." He turned to me, his voice cold and deliberate. "This seat belongs to my real daughter now. Get out." I stared at him, certain I had misheard. "Gerald, I've sat here for 16 years. And now Madison needs it. Move." The room fell silent except for the soft Christmas music playing from the kitchen radio. Everyone stared at us, tension crackling in the air like static electricity before a storm. When I didn't immediately stand, Gerald stepped behind my chair. His hands landed on my shoulders, and before I could react, he shoved me hard. The chair toppled backward, sending me crashing to the hardwood floor. Pain shot up my spine as my elbow struck the ground, tearing through my dress shirt. As I lay there stunned and humiliated, I heard Madison whisper just loud enough for me to catch, "Maybe it's time you found your own family traditions." Nobody moved to help me. Nobody protested Gerald's actions. They all just sat there frozen while Christmas dinner continued around my prostrate form. That's when I knew everything was about to change. I pushed myself up from the floor, my dress shirt torn at the elbow, blood seeping through the fabric where my skin had scraped against the hardwood. The dining room felt smaller somehow, like the walls were closing in, pressing the weight of 16 years of Christmas memories into this single searing moment of rejection. Mom rushed toward me, her face pale with shock. "Archie, let me help you. Stay seated with the real family." Gerald commanded, not even looking in my direction. His attention had already returned to Madison, who was now holding court about morning sickness and due dates. Mom stopped mid-stride, caught between her maternal instincts and her husband's authority. The conflict played across her features like a silent movie love for me, battling against fear of confronting Gerald. Patricia actually laughed a nervous titter that sounded like breaking glass. "Well, Madison is having a baby, so family priorities change, don't they?" Frank and Dorothy exchanged uncomfortable glances, but remained seated, their hands folded in their laps like children waiting for permission to speak. After 70 years of marriage, they had perfected the art of avoiding family drama. Tyler, meanwhile, had pulled out his phone and was angling it toward me. "This might make good content. he said with a smirk. Real family dynamics, you know, very authentic. The casual cruelty of it stole my breath. This wasn't just rejection. It was entertainment. Madison feigned concern, tilting her head in a practiced expression I had seen her use in sponsored posts about mental health awareness. Archie, I hope you're not hurt. But maybe it's time you found your own family traditions. You're almost 30. I retreated to the kitchen, my sanctuary during countless childhood storms. The familiar space with its yellow walls and collection of ceramic roosters should have been comforting, but tonight it felt like a museum displaying artifacts of a life that no longer belonged to me. Under the bright fluorescent lights, I assessed the damage to my elbow while trying to process what had just happened. The cut wasn't deep, but it stung like betrayal given physical form. As I dabbed at the wound with paper towels, voices drifted from the dining room. I never felt like Archie was really my son anyway. Gerald was saying, his voice carrying the authority of someone finally speaking his truth. Carol married me when he was already formed. You know, different values, different priorities. Madison, though, she's got Patterson blood running through her veins. The words hit harder than his physical shove. 16 years of trying to earn his approval, 16 years of believing I was part of this family, crumbled like dry leaves. Mom appeared in the doorway, her eyes red-rimmed but her voice barely above a whisper. Archie, I'm so sorry. I don't know what's gotten into him tonight. Maybe it's just the excitement about the baby. Mom, he pushed me, in front of everyone. I know. She wrung her hands, glancing nervously towards the dining room. But I can't rock the boat right now. Not with the new grandchild coming. You understand, don't you? I understood perfectly. I understood that my place in this family had always been conditional subject to Gerald's moods and priorities. I understood that even my own mother would choose keeping the peace over defending me. While she returned to the dinner party, I stood at the kitchen window looking out at the darkening December sky. That's when I noticed something that made my blood run cold. Gerald's landscaping truck sat in the driveway, its side panel freshly painted with new lettering, Gerald and Madison Patterson Family Landscaping. The old sign, which had read Patterson and Son Landscaping since my senior year of high school, had been completely redone. My name, which Gerald had added when I started helping with the books during college summers, was gone. Erased. The realization hit me like ice water. This wasn't a spontaneous outburst triggered by Madison's pregnancy announcement. This was calculated, planned. Gerald had been systematically removing me from the family narrative for months, maybe years, and tonight was simply the grand finale. I turned back toward the kitchen counter, my mind reeling, and that's when I saw them. Crumpled papers in the trash can, legal documents with the letterhead of Brennan and Associates Attorneys at Law. My hands shook as I smoothed out the papers, my forensic accounting training automatically cataloging what I was seeing. A petition to contest my father's life insurance policy. Documents questioning the validity of beneficiary designations. Legal arguments claiming that since I wasn't Gerald's biological child, the money my father had left for my college education and future should be redistributed. Gerald wanted to steal my inheritance. The pages revealed months of legal maneuvering, with Gerald arguing that my father's policy should benefit legitimate family members, rather than non-blood relatives who happened to be living in the household at the time of the beneficiary designation. $25,000. That's what my father had left me, money that paid for my college education and helped me start my career. Money that Gerald had apparently been coveting since the day Mom remarried. But there was more. Financial documents showing Gerald's attempts to access Mom's savings account, the one she had maintained separately since Dad's death. Bank statements with forged signatures, investment records with unauthorized transactions. Gerald wasn't just trying to exclude me from the family. He was systematically stealing from Mom, using my presence as a scapegoat to cover his financial crimes. I photographed every document with my phone, my professional instincts taking over. chain of custody evidence preservation documentation of patterns of fraud. This wasn't just family drama anymore. This was criminal conspiracy. As I folded the papers back into the trash, careful to leave everything exactly as I had found it, Gerald's voice boomed from the dining room. To Madison and Tyler, and the next generation of real Patterson family, the sound of clinking glasses felt like gunshots in the quiet kitchen. They were toasting my replacement while I stood among the evidence of their betrayal. But they had made one crucial mistake. They had targeted someone who knew exactly how to follow a money trail. I slipped upstairs to my old bedroom, now decorated with Madison's influencer aesthetic ring, lights, camera equipment, and motivational posters about living your best life. The space that had once held my high school trophies and college acceptance letters now showcased Madison's brand partnerships and cosmetics. But I wasn't here for nostalgia. I was here to investigate. My old computer still sat on the desk, supposedly retired, but actually still functional. Madison had been using it for backup storage, apparently unaware that I still had administrative access to all my old files and software. What I found made my stomach drop. Someone had been systematically accessing my personal documents, employment records from Morrison and Associates, bank statements, investment portfolio summaries, tax returns dating back 5 years, every piece of information needed to build a comprehensive financial profile. But it went deeper than simple snooping. Using my forensic accounting software, I traced digital fingerprints through the system. Gerald had been methodically documenting my income assets and spending patterns for months. He knew exactly how much I made, where I banked, what I owned, and what I owed. In a folder labeled Family Restructuring, I found Gerald's master plan laid out in spreadsheets and legal notes. He had been working with his attorney to build a case that I was financially successful enough not to need family support, while Madison, as a struggling entrepreneur and soon-to-be mother, deserved priority access to family resources. The plan was elegant in its cruelty. First, establish that I was an outsider who had taken advantage of the family's generosity. Second, document my financial independence as proof I no longer needed assistance. Third, legally challenge my inheritance and Mom's beneficiary designations. Fourth, redirect all family wealth toward Gerald's biological child and grandchild. Tonight's dinner theater was Step 5: create a public incident that demonstrated my estrangement from the family, with witnesses present to confirm Gerald's narrative. But as I dug deeper into the computer files, I discovered something that chilled me to the bone. Hidden in Madison's photo folder, disguised among hundreds of selfies and brand collaboration images, I found audio files. Dozens of them dating back 3 months. I plugged in headphones and pressed play on the most recent recording. "Are you sure this will work?" Madison's voice, uncertain and younger sounding than her usual confident persona. "Trust me, sweetheart," Gerald replied. "We need Archie out of the picture before the baby comes. He's not really family anyway, and the sooner Carol accepts that, the better off everyone will be." "But what if Mom doesn't go along with it?" "She will. She's been so confused lately, so dependent on my guidance. A few more weeks of the vitamins I've been giving her, and she'll agree to anything I suggest." Vitamins. My hands went cold as I remembered Mom's increasing forgetfulness over the past few months, her unusual fatigue, the way she seemed to drift in and out of conversations. Gerald was drugging her. I fast-forwarded through more recordings, each one revealing another layer of the conspiracy. Gerald and Madison discussing how to gradually isolate me from family events. Plans to make me appear ungrateful and hostile. Strategies for convincing Mom that I didn't care about the family anymore. But the most damning recording was from just last week. "What about Christmas dinner?" Madison asked. "That's the perfect opportunity. We'll invite everyone, make sure there are plenty of witnesses. I'll provoke an incident that shows how volatile and inappropriate Archie has become. Once the family sees him lose control, they'll understand why we need to make changes." "And if he doesn't lose control?" Gerald chuckled, a sound like grinding glass. "Then I'll make sure he does. A little push in the right direction, you might say. They had orchestrated everything. The seating arrangement, the pregnancy announcement, the deliberate provocation, even the physical confrontation. Tonight was supposed to be my public execution, with my own family as the firing squad. I sat back in Madison's desk chair, overwhelmed by the scope of their betrayal. But my professional training kicked in the methodical mindset that had made me successful at Morrison & Associates. Evidence, documentation, chain of custody, pattern of behavior. I began copying files to my secure cloud storage, organizing them into categories: financial fraud, elder abuse, conspiracy, evidence tampering. Each audio recording, each forged document, each illegal transaction was cataloged and preserved. Gerald thought he was dealing with a hurt stepson who could be bullied into submission. He had no idea he was up against a forensic accountant who specialized in white-collar crime. As I worked, I could hear the dinner party continuing downstairs. More toasts to Madison's pregnancy, more discussion of family plans that explicitly excluded me. Gerald's voice dominated the conversation, painting a picture of the bright future awaiting the real Patterson family. But then I found something that made me stop cold. A medical research folder on Gerald's side of the computer filled with articles about memory loss, drugs, cognitive impairment medications, and legal guardianship procedures. Document after document detailing how to make someone appear mentally unfit to make financial decisions. Gerald wasn't just trying to steal Mom's money. He was planning to have her declared incompetent so he could gain complete control of her assets and then commit her to a care facility. The timeline was clear: remove Archie from the family, isolate Carol from outside support, gradually incapacitate her with medication, then use her confusion as grounds for legal guardianship. Once he had control of her finances, Mom would disappear into some underfunded nursing home, while Gerald and Madison lived off her life's savings. I stared at the screen, my hands trembling with rage and fear. This wasn't just about inheritance money anymore. My mother was in immediate physical danger. I pulled out my phone and dialed the emergency number for Morrison & Associates. My colleague Jake Martinez answered on the second ring. "Jake, it's Archie. I need your help with something urgent. Family emergency involving elder abuse and financial fraud." "On Christmas Eve, this must be serious." "It is. I'm sending you an encrypted file package with evidence of systematic fraud and conspiracy. I need you to contact your friend at the FBI White Collar Crime Division. Tonight." "Archie, what's going on?" I looked around Madison's room at the evidence of a life built on lies and manipulation, then down at the dinner party where my mother was slowly being poisoned while her husband planned her imprisonment. "I'm about to save my mother's life." Jake's contact at the FBI was Special Agent Sarah Chen, a 20-year veteran of white-collar crime investigations who had worked with our firm on several major cases. When Jake explained the situation, she agreed to review my evidence package immediately, despite the holiday. While uploading files to the secure FBI portal, I continued my investigation of Gerald's business records. What I found painted a picture of systematic fraud spanning years. Patterson Landscaping was hemorrhaging money. Gerald had been losing major contracts due to poor work quality and missed deadlines, but he'd hidden these losses by creating fake invoices and phantom clients. The business checking account showed a pattern of unauthorized transfers to personal accounts, some in amounts large enough to constitute felony theft. The new truck I'd seen in the driveway, the fancy equipment he'd been bragging about Madison's expensive lifestyle, even the Christmas dinner we were eating downstairs. All of it funded by stolen money. Gerald had taken out loans using Mom's house as collateral without her knowledge or consent. Forged documents showed her signature on papers she'd never seen, let alone signed. He owed nearly $60,000 to various creditors' money he'd spent maintaining his image as a successful businessman while his company crumbled. The landscaping business that had supposedly been successful enough to justify removing my name from the trucks was actually days away from bankruptcy. But Gerald had a plan to solve his financial problems, steal Mom's savings contest, my inheritance, and use the combined money to pay off his debts while making Mom disappear into state care. I cross-referenced the medical research with Mom's recent behavior changes. The timeline matched perfectly. For the past 3 months, she'd been increasingly forgetful, unusually compliant with Gerald's demands, and physically weaker than I'd ever seen her. The vitamins he'd been giving her contained benzodiazepines anti-anxiety medications that in small doses would cause confusion and memory problems without being immediately detectable. Gerald had been slowly poisoning my mother while planning her financial destruction. My phone buzzed with a text from Agent Chen. "Reviewing your materials now. This is extensive. Can you provide bank account numbers and recent transaction records?" I sent her everything, including Gerald's hidden accounts and the forged loan documents. Within minutes, she called me directly. "Mr. Patterson, this is Agent Chen. Your evidence package is remarkable. How did you compile this so quickly?" "Forensic accounting training and 16 years of access to family financial information. Agent Chen, my mother is in immediate danger. He's been drugging her to make her compliant." "I understand your concern. What you've provided shows a clear pattern of elder abuse and financial fraud. But I need to tell you something that might surprise you." My heart stopped. "What?" "Gerald Patterson is already under federal investigation. We've been building a case against him for months regarding fraudulent federal contracting. He submitted false bids for government landscaping projects using fabricated credentials and stolen minority business certifications." The room seemed to spin around me. "You already know about him. We've been watching his business practices, but your evidence fills in gaps we didn't even know existed. The elder abuse angle, the family conspiracy, the systematic fraud. This is exactly what we needed to move forward with arrests." Tonight. But Mr. Patterson, there's something else you should know. Your sister Madison contacted us 2 months ago." I nearly dropped the phone. "What?" "She discovered Gerald was stealing money from her social media earnings funds she'd been saving to move out and start her own life. When she confronted him, he threatened to destroy her reputation and her relationship with your mother. She agreed to help us gather evidence." The world shifted beneath me like an earthquake. "Madison is working with the FBI. She's been recording conversations and documenting Gerald's activities. Tonight's dinner, the pregnancy announcement, even her boyfriend Tyler. They're all part of an operation to get Gerald to reveal the full scope of his crimes." I stared at the wall, struggling to process this information. The push, the humiliation, was meant to provoke Gerald into making statements about his plans while witnesses were present. Madison had to play her role convincingly to maintain his trust. "What about the pregnancy?" "Real, but the timing of the announcement was coordinated with us. We needed Gerald to feel confident about his control over the family situation." My head was reeling. Madison, who I'd thought was part of the conspiracy against me, was actually risking everything to save Mom and expose Gerald's crimes. The smirks, the cruelty, the apparent cooperation with Gerald's plan. All of it was an act designed to protect our mother. "Agent Chen, what happens now?" "We're mobilizing tonight. Federal charges for fraud, forgery, and wire fraud, plus local charges for elder abuse and conspiracy. Your mother will be safe, and Gerald won't be able to harm anyone else." "What about Mom? She's downstairs right now, still affected by whatever he's been giving her." "We'll have medical personnel standing by. With your evidence and Madison's recordings, we have everything we need for immediate arrest and intervention." I hung up and sat in stunned silence. For months, I'd felt increasingly isolated from my family, convinced that Gerald's manipulation was working, and that even Madison had turned against me. The reality was completely different. My little sister, who I'd dismissed as a shallow influencer, was actually an undercover federal informant, risking her safety to save our mother. The pregnancy announcement, which had seemed like the final nail in my coffin, was actually the signal that the investigation was complete, and arrests were imminent. Tonight's humiliation, as painful as it had been, was necessary theater designed to give Gerald enough confidence to reveal his full criminal intent. I looked out the window and saw unmarked cars positioning themselves around the neighborhood. Federal agents, local police, medical personnel, all coordinating to end Gerald's reign of terror over our family. My phone buzzed with a text from Madison. "I'm sorry for everything tonight. I know it hurt, but it's almost over. Mom will be safe soon." For the first time in months, I allowed myself to hope that Christmas might bring something other than heartbreak. But Gerald had no idea what was coming for him. I made my way quietly back downstairs, where the dinner party had evolved into an increasingly grandiose celebration of Gerald's vision for the family's future. He stood at the head of the table, wine glass in hand, gesturing expansively while outlining his plans. "The business is expanding faster than ever," he declared, his face flushed with alcohol and excitement. "Madison's influence on social media is bringing in younger clients who want that modern aesthetic. And with the baby coming, we're building something that will last for generations." Mom sat in her chair looking glazed and distant, occasionally nodding, but clearly struggling to follow the conversation. The medication in her system was making her increasingly compliant and confused, exactly as Gerald intended. "Uenhum." "Carol. We'll need to restructure the family finances to optimize for the new generation." Gerald continued his tone, patronizing, as he addressed his drugged wife. "I've been working with lawyers to make sure Madison and the baby are properly protected. Some legal paperwork to sign, but nothing complicated." Patricia and Jim nodded approvingly, completely unaware they were witnessing the setup for financial elder abuse. Frank and Dorothy looked uncomfortable, but remained silent, decades of avoiding family conflict keeping them passive. Tyler continued documenting everything with his phone, though I now understood his recordings were evidence collection rather than social media content. "Where's Archie?" Dorothy asked suddenly, her voice cutting through Gerald's monologue. "Probably sulking somewhere," Gerald replied dismissively. "He never could handle not being the center of attention. Honestly, it's better this way. The real family can focus on what matters without constant drama from outsiders." Madison shifted uncomfortably in her chair but maintained her role. "Dad's right. Some people just can't accept change." I stayed hidden in the kitchen doorway, listening to Gerald dig his own grave with every word. Agent Chen had been right. He was revealing the full scope of his plans, confident that his control over the family was absolute. "The house will need some updates before the baby comes," Gerald continued. "Maybe we'll finish the basement conversion, give Madison and Tyler more space. There's plenty of room once we're not accommodating people who don't really belong here anyway." "What about Archie's room?" Frank asked. "Storage space," Gerald replied coldly. "He's nearly 30 successful career his own apartment. Time he stopped depending on family resources." The casual cruelty in his voice was breathtaking. 16 years of shared holidays, family dinners, and life events dismissed as if they'd never happened. My phone vibrated with a text from Agent Chen. "Teams in position. Stay clear of the dining room for the next 10 minutes. I moved deeper into the kitchen, my heart pounding as I realized the moment of truth was approaching. Everything Gerald had worked toward, every lie he'd constructed, every relationship he'd manipulated, was about to collapse around him. Through the window, I could see agents moving into position around the house. Professional, methodical, prepared for any contingency. Gerald's voice grew louder and more belligerent as he continued drinking. "You know what the problem is with this country. Too many people think they're entitled to things they didn't earn. Take Archie. Lived in this house for years, ate our food, used our resources, and now he acts like he deserves equal treatment with my real daughter." "Gerald," Mom said weakly, "that's not fair to Archie. He's been part of this family since he was 12. "Has he, though?" Gerald's voice turned sharp, dangerous. "Really? Because it seems to me like he's been taking advantage of your guilt about his dead father, living off your sympathy while contributing nothing meaningful to this family's future." The words hung in the air like poison gas. Even Patricia and Jim looked shocked by the viciousness of the attack. "I think you've had too much wine," Dorothy said quietly. "I think I've had too little truth," Gerald shot back. Everyone wants to pretend we're one big happy family, but blood matters. Loyalty matters. And some people will never be loyal because they don't belong here in the first place. Madison looked like she was about to break character, tears welling in her eyes as she listened to Gerald's hatred pour out unchecked. That's when I heard the cars pulling into the driveway. Gerald heard them too. His head snapped towards the window, his expression shifting from confidence to confusion. "Who's that?" he asked, moving toward the front door. Through the kitchen window, I watched federal agents emerge from unmarked vehicles, their movements coordinated and purposeful. Agent Chen led the group, her badge clearly visible, her posture radiating authority. The doorbell rang, followed immediately by authoritative knocking. "FBI, open the door, please." The dining room fell silent except for the soft Christmas music still playing from the kitchen radio. Gerald stood frozen in the hallway, his face cycling through confusion, fear, and desperate calculation. "What's happening?" Patricia whispered. Madison stood up slowly, her hands trembling but her voice steady. "Justice," she said simply. Gerald spun toward her, understanding dawning in his eyes. "You." "Open the door now, Mr. Patterson." Agent Chen's voice carried clearly through the house. Gerald looked around the room like a trapped animal, seeing his carefully constructed world crumbling in real time. The family members he'd thought were under his control were staring at him with growing realization and horror. Mom struggled to stand, the medication making her movements clumsy but her maternal instincts cutting through the chemical fog. "Madison, what's going on?" "It's okay, Mom. Everything's going to be okay now." The knocking intensified. "Mr. Patterson, we have warrants. Open the door or we'll open it ourselves." Gerald's shoulders sagged as he realized there was nowhere to run and no more lies to tell. 16 years of manipulation and abuse were about to end in handcuffs and federal charges. He walked slowly towards the front door, his empire of deception collapsing with each step. But he had no idea that the worst was yet to come. Gerald opened the front door to find Agent Chen flanked by 4 federal agents and 2 local police officers. Their professional composure contrasted sharply with his panicked appearance, sweat beading on his forehead, despite the December cold. "Gerald Patterson, you're under arrest for federal fraud, elder abuse forgery, and conspiracy." Agent Chen's voice carried the weight of months of investigation. "You have the right to remain silent." "This is ridiculous," Gerald sputtered, but his voice lacked conviction. "I don't know what you think I've done, but this is harassment." "Sir, we have extensive evidence of your criminal activities, including audio recordings and financial documents. Please turn around and place your hands behind your back." As the handcuffs clicked into place, Gerald's carefully constructed facade finally cracked completely. The successful businessman, loving husband and father pillar of the community, all of it stripped away to reveal the desperate criminal beneath. The rest of the family stood in stunned silence, processing the rapid transformation of their Christmas celebration into a crime scene. Patricia clutched Jim's arm, while Frank and Dorothy held each other tightly. Tyler continued recording, but now his camera captured justice rather than cruelty. "This is insane," Gerald protested as agents led him towards the patrol car. "Carol, tell them this is crazy. Tell them I've done nothing wrong." But Mom wasn't listening to Gerald anymore. The shock of the arrests had somehow cut through the medication fog, and clarity was returning to her eyes like sunrise breaking through storm clouds. "The vitamins," she said quietly, her voice gaining strength with each word. "You've been putting something in my vitamins." Gerald's face went white. "Carol, you're confused. The medication is making you paranoid." "What medication?" Agent Chen asked sharply. "Mrs. Patterson, has your husband been giving you any substances without your knowledge?" "My daily vitamins." Mom replied, her memory becoming clearer as she spoke. "For months now, they've made me feel foggy and tired. I started pretending to take them weeks ago because something felt wrong." The admission hit Gerald like a physical blow. His primary tool for controlling Mom had been ineffective for weeks. meaning she'd been aware and alert during his most incriminating conversations. "You've been playing along?" he asked, disbelief and betrayal mixing in his voice. "I've been protecting myself," Mom replied with dignity I hadn't heard from her in months. "And gathering evidence." Agent Chen stepped forward. "Mrs. Patterson, have you been working with law enforcement?" "Not directly," Mom said, "but I've been documenting things that seemed wrong. Financial papers, strange phone calls, changes in Archie's bedroom. I knew something was happening, but I needed to understand the full scope before I acted." I stepped out of the kitchen, unable to remain hidden any longer. "Mom," she turned toward me, tears streaming down her face. "Archie, I'm so sorry about tonight. I knew Gerald was planning something cruel, but I had to let it happen to protect you and Madison in the long run. You knew about the dinner setup." "I suspected." Gerald had been talking about family restructuring and difficult conversations for weeks. When Madison came to me with her concerns about missing money, we started putting pieces together. Madison moved to Mom's side, dropping her influencer persona completely. Mom's been pretending to be confused and compliant while actually staying 2 steps ahead of Dad. We've been working together to document his crimes. The revelation was staggering. While I'd been feeling isolated and betrayed, both Mom and Madison had been conducting their own investigation, playing their assigned roles, while secretly gathering evidence. "The legal papers in the trash," I said. "I put them there," Mom replied. "I knew you'd find them and understand their significance. Your forensic accounting background made you the perfect person to analyze Gerald's financial crimes." Gerald stood beside the patrol car listening to his family's revelations with growing horror. Every person he'd thought he was manipulating had actually been manipulating him. "This is all lies," he shouted desperately. "Archie has turned you against me. He's been jealous of our family from the beginning." "Our family includes Archie," Madison said firmly. "It always has. You're the one who never belonged." Agent Chen interrupted the family confrontation. "Mr. Patterson, we have recorded evidence of your admissions tonight, including your statements about drugging your wife and stealing family assets. Your co-conspirators have been cooperating with our investigation for months." "Fonocom. Co-conspirators." Gerald looked around wildly. "Madison's been helping me. She agreed to everything." "Your daughter contacted the FBI 2 months ago when she discovered you were stealing from her business accounts," Agent Chen explained. "She's been recording your conversations and documenting your criminal activities under federal supervision." The final piece of Gerald's world collapsed. Madison, his beloved biological daughter, whom he'd thought was his partner in crime, had been the primary architect of his downfall. "You betrayed me," he whispered, staring at Madison in shock. "I protected my family," she replied. "The real family that includes Mom and Archie." Gerald's legs seemed to give out as the full scope of his defeat became clear. Federal agents helped him into the patrol car while he mumbled incoherently about loyalty and blood relatives and ungrateful children. Agent Chen approached our family group. "Mrs. Patterson, we'll need you to come to the hospital for blood tests to document the substances in your system. Madison, we'll need your full cooperation as our case moves forward. And Mr. Patterson," she turned to me, "your evidence package made tonight possible. Thank you." As the patrol cars pulled away, carrying Gerald toward federal detention, Christmas lights twinkled peacefully in neighborhood windows. The crisis was over, but the healing was just beginning. Frank and Dorothy approached Mom hesitantly. "Carol, we had no idea. If we'd known what Gerald was doing." "You couldn't have known," Mom replied gently. "He was very good at hiding his true nature." Patricia and Jim gathered their coats, clearly uncomfortable with the evening's revelations. "We should go," Patricia said. "Let you process everything." As the extended family members departed, offering awkward condolences and promises to call soon, our core family unit remained: Mom, Madison, Tyler, and me. For the first time in years, it felt complete. But the most important conversations were still ahead of us. 6 months later, I pulled into the driveway of Mom's new house, a cozy ranch-style home in a quiet neighborhood 20 minutes from downtown. She'd sold the old house, the one filled with Gerald's presence and painful memories, using the proceeds to start fresh in a place where she could build new traditions. Gerald had been sentenced to 8 years in federal prison for fraud, elder abuse, and conspiracy. The judge had been particularly harsh about his systematic poisoning of Mom, calling it a violation of the most basic trust between spouses. His landscaping business had been dissolved, with assets liquidated to repay the clients he'd defrauded. Madison opened the door before I could knock, her genuine smile a stark contrast to the calculated expressions she'd worn during those dark months of investigation. At 6 months pregnant, she glowed with the health and happiness that comes from living without fear. "Archie, perfect timing. Mom just finished making her famous apple pie." The house smelled like cinnamon and vanilla, warm and welcoming in ways the old house never had. Mom emerged from the kitchen floor, dusting her favorite apron, looking younger and more vibrant than I'd seen her in years. The confusion and fatigue that had marked her final months with Gerald were completely gone. "There's my son," she said, embracing me tightly. "How was the drive from Portland?" "Beautiful. The autumn colors were incredible." I handed her a bottle of wine and a gift bag. "I brought something for Madison, too." Inside the bag was a small wooden picture frame I'd made in a woodworking class, engraved with "Baby's First Christmas 2025. Madison teared up when she saw it. "Archie, this is beautiful. I can't believe you made this yourself." "Uncle privileges," I replied. "I plan to spoil this kid terribly." Tyler, who had proven himself to be much more thoughtful and genuine than his initial impression suggested, was setting up the dining table with Mom's good china. His phone remained tucked away, no longer documenting family moments for content, but simply being present in them. "Dinner's almost ready," Mom announced. "Archie, would you like to sit in your usual spot?" The question carried weight beyond its simple words. My usual spot was now permanently mine, no longer subject to Gerald's whims or manipulation. More than that, it represented belonging that couldn't be revoked or redistributed based on someone else's definition of family. As we gathered around the table, I reflected on how much had changed. Madison had used her social media platform to raise awareness about elder abuse and financial fraud, partnering with organizations that helped families recognize warning signs. Her pregnancy had brought her and Mom closer together, their shared experience of surviving Gerald's manipulation, creating an unbreakable bond. Tyler had surprised everyone by proposing to Madison on her birthday, presenting a ring he'd saved for months to buy. Their wedding was planned for the spring, a small ceremony in Mom's backyard with only the people who truly mattered. Mom had started volunteering at a domestic violence shelter, using her experience to help other women recognize and escape abusive situations. She'd also begun taking art classes, rediscovering creative passions that Gerald had slowly discouraged over the years. Before we eat, Mom said, "I want to say something." We joined hands around the table, a tradition she'd started in the new house. "This year has taught me that family isn't defined by blood or marriage certificates. It's defined by love, loyalty, and the courage to protect each other when it matters most. Gerald tried to divide us, but instead, he showed us how strong we are when we stand together." She squeezed my hand. "Archie, you've always been my son from the moment you were 12 years old and needed a mother's love. That will never change no matter what anyone says or does." Madison wiped tears from her eyes. "I'm sorry it took me so long to stand up to him. I was scared and confused, but I should have protected you sooner." "You were protecting yourself first," I replied. "That's what family does. We create safety for each other so everyone can be strong enough to fight when necessary." As we shared the meal Mom had prepared with love, rather than obligation, I felt the deep satisfaction of justice served and family restored. Gerald had tried to rewrite our history, but love had proven stronger than manipulation. The doorbell rang during dessert. Mom looked puzzled. We weren't expecting anyone. I opened the door to find Agent Chen standing on the porch holding a wrapped package. "Agent Chen, what a surprise. Please come in." "I can't stay long," she said, "but I wanted to deliver this personally and share some news." She handed me the package. Inside was a framed letter from the FBI director commending our family's cooperation in the investigation and expressing gratitude for our courage in exposing financial elder abuse. The Gerald Patterson case has become a model for how families can work together with law enforcement to protect vulnerable members, Agent Chen explained. "Your case is being used to train agents across the country." But then her expression grew more serious. "There's something else. Gerald's appeals have been exhausted. He contacted us last week asking to speak with your family." The room fell silent. None of us had heard from Gerald since his sentencing, and his sudden desire for contact felt ominous. "What does he want?" Mom asked quietly. "To apologize, and to sign papers formally renouncing any claim to your assets or inheritance rights. He says he wants to make things right before he serves the rest of his sentence." Madison shook her head immediately. "We don't owe him anything. Not our time, not our forgiveness, nothing. The choice is entirely yours," Agent Chen said. "But his lawyer says he has information about other potential victims' families he might have targeted before yours. Talking to him could help other people." I looked around the table at the family Gerald had tried to destroy. We'd survived his worst efforts and built something beautiful from the ruins he'd left behind. "We'll discuss it," Mom said finally. "But whatever we decide together." After Agent Chen left, we talked long into the evening about forgiveness, justice, and moving forward. Gerald's request for contact forced us to confront questions we'd been avoiding. How much of our healing required his participation? Could we truly move on without closure from him? In the end, we decided that our healing belonged to us, not to him. We'd built our family's future on love and trust, not on Gerald's approval or remorse. Whether he found peace with his crimes was his responsibility, not ours. Madison placed her hand on her growing belly. "I want my child to grow up knowing they come from a family that chooses love over fear, truth over convenience, and each other over everything else." "Then that's the family we'll be," Mom said simply. As I drove back to Portland that night, I thought about the Christmas dinner 1 year ago that had nearly destroyed us. Gerald's push at that table had been meant to break our family apart, but instead it had revealed our unbreakable bonds. The child Madison was carrying would never know Gerald's manipulation or cruelty. They would grow up in a family that had been tested by fire and emerged stronger, more honest, and more loving than before. Sometimes the greatest gift comes wrapped in the worst pain. Our family had been forced to confront ugly truths about trust and loyalty, but we'd emerged with something precious, the absolute certainty that we belonged to each other by choice, not obligation. That kind of family is worth fighting for. So when someone asks me what I learned from the worst Christmas of my life, I tell them this: real family doesn't abandon you when things get difficult. Real family doesn't let anyone convince them you don't belong. Real family stands together against anyone who tries to divide them with lies and manipulation. And sometimes real family has the courage to let someone push you down so they can help you stand back up stronger than ever before. Have you ever had to choose between keeping peace and protecting someone you love? How did you find the courage to do what was right, even when it meant confronting difficult truths? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Thank you for listening to my story and for being part of a community that believes families can heal from even the deepest betrayals. If this story resonated with you, please like this video to help others find it who might need to hear that they're not alone in facing family manipulation. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories about real families overcoming real challenges and share this video with anyone who might need to be reminded that love is always stronger than fear. Until next time, remember that you belong exactly where you choose to build your life, with people who choose to build theirs with you.